Very pleased not to be joined here at Blogging the Boys by the one and only, the dashing, the debonair. He has promised to tell us his top 10 favorite movies of all time before we leave here. It is from FTN Fantasy and from however you have become a smart football fan, Aaron Schatz. Aaron, thank you so much for taking the time to join us at Blogging the Boys.
Hey, thanks for having me on, man.
Number one movie right now, all time.
Anchorman.
That's number one?
That's my favorite, probably my favorite movie to rewatch over and over again. Dramas would be The Godfather.
Okay.
Or Crimes and Misdemeanors.
Okay, those are good choices. I love Anchorman, obviously. I just kind of hate people from like, I hate when people present like an Anchorman quote as like an original thought. Like I'm a Houston Astros fan as an example, and Justin Verlander's Twitter bio, I think still is even like the mahogany quote. It's like, we get it. You saw the movie. It was really funny. We all think the quote is really funny. You know, you don't have to act like it's your own thing and you're the only person who found the movie to be funny.
Yes, well, we all found it to be funny. That's why it's one of the best comedies of all time.
We're not here to talk about something I hate in that. We're here to talk about something else I hate in the Dallas Cowboys. Aaron, it has been the longest bye week that I can remember for the Dallas Cowboys. We're speaking on Friday, October the 18th. And Cowboys fans are down bad. And I would estimate that you don't have much that is going to help them in this time.
No, I mean, the best thing I have to help Cowboys fans is just that even at this point in the season, you learn a little bit more from your preseason priors than you do from what you've seen through 6 games. And our preseason on priors on the Cowboys were that they were pretty good. So it's very likely that they're better than this, that they're going to improve. But there's no question that, I mean, partly because of injuries, and they'll get guys back in the next week or two, but they are playing badly.
You live, I mean, I don't want to speak for you, but in an objective world, in a database world. And that's a world void of another thing that is super popular is the word vibes. You can't go anywhere without people being like, the vibes are not great, whatever. I'm sure Justin Verlander feels that way as well. The vibes are bad with the Dallas Cowboys, to be clear, but outside of their special teams, according to your DVOA system, they are very bad. And you're right, objectively, that injuries have taken a toll on this team, but I think people also feel like there's no reason the offense should be this poor, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it will help to have Brandon Cooks back. I will admit that I was one of the people before the season who was like, you don't really need a good running back. As long as your offensive line is good, you'll run. It turns out, first of all, that they probably could use better running back. But more importantly, the offensive line is not blocking well. So, it wouldn't matter if they had a really good running back. They're not getting good blocking. The offensive line is not playing well, either pass blocking or run blocking right now. The defensive line is not playing well, although obviously you get Micah Parsons back and that changes dramatically. But yeah, the offense, Dak is better than this. Like, they should be better than this. CeeDee Lamb is better than this. Like, we don't throw our priors out the window after 6 games. The Cowboys should be better than this. The problem is we thought the Cowboys would be like a top 10 offense. And based on what we've seen in the last 6 weeks, plus our priors, it's probably more like 14th, 15th, which is not going to do it.
You said something that I think everybody would scoff at. But that you said it certainly lends legitimacy to it in my mind. You said that they'll be better when they get Brandon Cooks back. Brandon Cooks is the Woody that all these fans are ready to throw away. And not that they have a buzz, that they're, moving on to, but everybody's kind of sick of Brandon Cooks at this point in time. It's really unfair to Brandon.
But he's better than what else they got.
But so, I mean, is that maybe the perspective you're coming from? Is like, they'll get Brandon Cooks back because he may be a 6 out of 10, but they're dealing with like 2s and 3s right now.
Yeah, basically, yes.
Man, that is.
CeeDee Lamb should still be a 9. He's not playing up to his usual level, but he will over time. He will.
I don't mean to put you on the spot, but you are always so great at combing through data, on a moment's notice or upon a command. I'm not sure if you saw, but this week, Troy Aikman was on the ticket in Dallas and had some choice words for the Cowboys wide receivers, called their route running poor. He used the word lazy, not in an attacking sort of way. And obviously it feels like CeeDee Lamb, again, back to our kind of vibes perspective, is not playing well. Yet when you look at him from a totality standpoint, which is dumb, but from a yardage standpoint, whatever, he's kind of on pace with where he's been at this point in seasons past. But when you look at advanced statistics or things like that, he is performing rather poorly relative to other receivers you expect to lead their teams or carry their teams. I don't know if you have any kind of measurement or assessment on maybe a drop off that we've seen from CeeDee, because he's the show. Like he's the 9 out of 10 to your point. And if you're not getting anything from him, and Dak Prescott's not playing well, which is obviously exacerbating the issue, then, it is the opposite of a rising tide that, lifts all boats. This is a sinking tide or a poor tide that's sinking all the boats.
Yeah. I mean, he's got negative receiving DVOA in by regular DVOA. In the new route DVOA that I introduced last year, that's based on routes rather than targets, of course, CeeDee gets open and draws more targets, so he does better in that. But he's still 42nd in the league. Last year, he was top 10. Like, there's no question he's not playing up to his usual level.
How much?
Some of that is Prescott, but some of it's him.
You have studied football much longer than anybody, certainly at an advanced level. How much of that? Because I don't know that this is a chicken or the egg thing. This is like the 3-headed dog in the Sorcerer's Stone, where they're all just attacking at the same time. And I think it was Fluffy was the name, if I recall. And how much do you put on Mike McCarthy for this? Because there is enough blame, right, to say CeeDee's underwhelming, Prescott's underwhelming. But
yeah, it's probably the kind of thing where you have to watch the games closer and be like, is he just running the same route over and over again? Or are his routes not crisp? Or is Dak just not getting him the ball? And I don't really, I haven't watched them close enough to be like, oh yeah, I know. I can distribute the blame pie here. I don't,
It is tough. I mean, and that's where things like DVOA have always, I felt, proved teams that were better than conventional wisdom suggested. The early 2010 Seahawks, obviously,
the problem is the Cowboys are worse right now.
That's exactly.
They're worse than their record, right? They're the lowest of the 3-3 teams,
and that's, I mean, amazing. Which is why I understand your reasoning. Certainly, that players who are injured returning will help out and help mitigate some of this, but they're also going to be facing some of the better teams, in the NFL. Their next game is on the road against the San Francisco 49ers, and DVOA aside, as much as I love it, I mean, from a narrative standpoint, that team owns them. I mean, there's no question about that.
Also, San Francisco's been much better. San Francisco is the opposite. San Francisco is the best of the 3-3 teams this year. So they have the 10th hardest schedule remaining by average DVOA of opponents. So yeah, it's tough.
It's an incredibly tough situation, and all of it was predictable. I know you've written, and the all-in stuff has been just, beaten to death, but this is a roster that is worse than it was last year.
I don't feel like all of it was predictable, though. This is a team that's gone 12-5 for 3 straight regular seasons. And yeah, they let some guys leave and they didn't re-sign, they didn't bring in guys to replace them. And so we're like, yeah, they'll be a little bit worse this year. But a little bit worse this year is 10-7. Not what they've been so far, which looks like they're more on the track to 7-10. We couldn't predict what Washington would happen, happened to Washington, right? Like, there was a good chance that at least one of the rookie quarterbacks would be good, but we wouldn't know who it was. And, like I said a lot before the season, you have to assume that in general, rookie quarterbacks will be bad, right? In general, rookie quarterbacks will be like what Drake May was last week, which is there'll be a couple of plays where you see the promise, but the overall product will be below average. But Jaden Daniels hasn't been that. And so now that's a team that Dallas has to play twice still that looks much better than they did before the season.
Yeah, I think, to stick in the division, the Eagles are the team that is kind of chalk relative to expectations, realistic expectations. They're a little bit worse. They're kind of living up to the second half of last year, right? Still kind of good. Again, you can compartmentalize it. And maybe the bottom falling out was not completely predictable, but I think Cowboys fans would clap back and say, like, well, they did nothing, and that is certainly obvious. But if you had, I know that you didn't want to divvy out the blame pie, but if you had to divvy out the credit pie for the last 3 years, going 12-5, I mean, the primary components I would imagine would be Micah Parsons, Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, Mike McCarthy. As little credit as anybody wants to give Mike, but he is the head coach and certainly
the cornerbacks, right? Like, I mean, obviously Diggs was, injured last year, but Bland played well, and before that Diggs and Gilmore. And
so this is
Yeah,
kind of
Diggs is still playing really well, by the way. I did the first version of my cornerback coverage for this year, and Diggs came out really well. So he's still playing really well.
including the Lions game. That's a
That's for the
question.
whole season, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is some. That's why I was super anxious to talk to you. There is some. It's not quite as bad as it feels. I mean, you lose 47-9 and sit on it for a bye week. It's going to feel bigger than it. It's one loss ultimately, and they are 3-3 and whatnot. If I guess now it's a little bit narrative driven. This is kind of my last sweeping question, but what team can you recall in all you did? You had a great point after the Ravens beat the Cowboys. I think right before that they were one of the better 0-2 teams by DVOA at that point of the season. If you kind of recall a team that was in this boat, that was maybe in this kind of a funk early on relative to DVOA, but kind of alive with a 500 record. Just kind of, again, looking through the past, what team does this line up with? It's very difficult to draw a comparison for me.
Yeah, I'm like Coleman. I'm not good with memory. To think of a team that had high expectations and then low performance, and then kind of came around to what the expectations were. There's nothing that's really. I mean, there are a couple of Patriots teams that had really slow starts. But obviously their expectations were even higher.
Right.
But if you think about was it 2014 that the Patriots got slaughtered by Kansas City in week 4 or Cincinnati?
Yeah, that
There
was
were a couple of those
on to
games
Cincinnati
in
game.
20 teens where they got slaughtered early on and people were like, that's it, dynasty's over, baby. Like that's it, they're done, and they came back and they were still the Patriots. Like, I mean, the Cowboys are not, I don't think anybody's expectation would be that they were going to be that good, but there are teams that have gotten slaughtered the way they got slaughtered by Detroit and have come back. If you want to go really far back in time, the 1994 San Francisco 49ers, when they lost to Philadelphia 40-8 in week 5, is sort of a similar thing.
Well, I know you said you weren't great with memory. 94 San Francisco 49ers is kind of a sore subject around here. No big deal. But,
Yeah.
Is there any solace to take? Because some people think that when you look at data that maybe says like the house isn't on fire, there's just a candle burning in the kitchen type of thing. That the wax is dripping out or whatever.
No, the house is on fire, man. I mean, they're 25th on offense and 27th on defense, and they're being propped up by special teams. That's not a good thing.
If I'm trying to cope, though, through your methodology, I look at the Saints' loss is inexcusable no matter what, especially, and I know that they're injured too, but the fact that
what we've seen from them since makes that loss look worse. Yes.
Right. So that one fully with you. Again, if I'm trying to cope, and I'm not in the mood to cope, but if I am, I would point to the fact that both Baltimore and Detroit are top 3 teams by overall DVOA. I mean, there's, no shame in that, I suppose. Again, if you really are stretching and looking for ways to justify what we've seen, you mentioned those big time losses that teams had. If you lost 47-9 at the hands of a top 3 team, there are more embarrassing ways to lose 47-9, I suppose, is my point.
Yeah. I mean, San Francisco lost big to Baltimore last year, but ended up being fine in the long run. I think, if you want a positive for Dallas, the biggest positive for Dallas is that you don't throw away your preseason priors after 6 weeks. And what we knew about this team going into the season, we still know, and they should be better than this. And Micah Parsons is coming back, and they should be better than this. That's the positive. It's not in anything they've actually done this. There's no positive in how they've played this year. I mean, yeah, they've escaped with a couple of wins, but if you look at the underlying stats, it's just really, really poor. Really poor given how much talent they should have and how good the quarterback should be. But the thing is that how good the quarterback should be still matters, right? Like, we have knowledge of Prescott from the last 2 years, not just from this year, and he should be better than this.
I suppose that's all you kind of really can hang your hat on, is that you're hoping that, and I think there is some data is not the right word, but some conventional intellect to support that this might be the worst version of them that we're seeing so far, and that they'll regress to the mean at some point, and that mean has been very
a team that has Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb should not be 25th on offense. Like, no matter who the other players are.
That's interesting. So, you like that can be true. Like that, just a singular quarterback and wide receiver pair.
I mean, unless the other players are all really bad, and they're not. I mean, Smith, Guyton's a rookie, but he should, be talented. And Smith, the guard, is talented, and Ferguson is talented. It's not like they're just two guys on offense, but if you put an average team next to those two guys, it should be better than this.
Yeah, it's not quite like Iron Man and Captain America and the rest of the Avengers, but it is, like maybe Batman and Superman in the DC universe because, admittedly lower quality type stuff. So, right on.
Yeah, it's Demolition Man or whatever. D-Man, what was that guy? Was a homeless guy? D-Man?
Yeah. That's the extent of my knowledge that I was hoping would impress you.
That's a deep cut Avengers cut right there.
Aaron Schatz of FTN Fantasy. Last time we spoke, it was in advance of the season. You had everything coming out before, but any big projects, anything we need to be on the lookout for relative to FTN?
The best thing I can say is if you subscribe to FTN Fantasy, you get the DFS optimizers, you get really accurate projections for every week. You get all the DVOA data during the season. You get the Stats Hub now, where we have DVOA data sortable by like all kinds of charting categories during the season. So you can find out that Sam Darnold is the best quarterback in the league against man coverage this year, or that Patrick Mahomes has tons of value on quick outs this year, like all kinds of stuff like that. So the FTN Stats Hub has tons of really good stuff. And if you go to ftnfantasy.com/DVOA, you'll see all of our content, and the DVOA commentaries on Tuesdays and the stats articles by Brian Knowles on Friday are still free. And hopefully that will convince you to subscribe to all the stuff.
That is awesome. As we leave, a movie to recommend to people. You talked about your favorites, but something, I asked you this previously and you were very busy and incredibly busy this time of year, obviously, but maybe it's an old one that you're just like, not enough people talk about this.
I like David Mamet. David Mamet, I feel, I'm not going to get into politics here, but David Mamet has gone off the deep end, but he has made some really great movies. So either Homicide with Joe Mantegna or The Spanish Prisoner with Steve Martin.
That's well said. And there's a good lesson to be learned there that, you can disagree with the way someone is now, whatever the case may be, but
and still enjoy their art. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Aaron Schatz of FTN Fantasy, you are the GOAT. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us again.
Thanks for having me on.